Welcome to another To Be Limitless Thursday session. So great to have people here from all around the world. Shaun's joining us from San Francisco today. Obviously, I'm not obviously, but I'm joining from Dublin, early morning in Dublin, late night in San Francisco, and then we've got people joining from the Middle East, Australia, New Zealand. So it's really fantastic to have people here. So this session is multi-layered and multifactorial. It's a story of real resilience. It's a story that takes a good few of us on this call back to our early to late teens, and then takes us forward. It then takes us on a journey of building a business. It takes us on a journey of then catastrophic brain injury, and then the recovery from that, and then the story post that, and the platform forward. It's a really inspiring story. As I was saying to Shaun earlier, typically the people that I work with on these Thursday sessions, typically they're people that I actually work with from a coaching perspective. But the reality is, when I heard this story, I just knew it was a story that needed to be told. And I was also aware that it's a story that is ongoing. So it's also part of the recovery to share this story. And as you can see with Shaun's head down there, you can still see some remnants of that scar.
And I had 66 staples, which my head looked like a baseball, basically.
Yeah, so great. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that component. But as I was saying earlier, and I'm about to introduce Shaun, this is my memory of Shaun Gelling. That's me carrying the football for Marist College Ashgrove in the first 15 against St. Lawrence's. Billy Prohl coming up close behind us, and then Shaun, who was the vice captain of that rugby team. Well, now, when I went to school, Shaun, no one moved better than Shaun Gelling. No one danced better than Shaun Gelling. No one had footwork like Shaun Gelling.
That hasn't changed, man. I'm still a good dancer.
Still a good dancer, which was super to hear. So Shaun had a lot of talent. Shaun was a guy that had the capacity to do multiple things. He was an Australian junior cricketer. He represented the Australian Marist cricket team. Incredibly talented student athlete, and he was both student and athlete. So he had the capacity to do so many different things. So Shaun, welcome, first of all. Thanks for coming on the Thursday session. It's something we do the last Thursday of every week, and it's something we do to inspire people and share insight with people. So you and I first met 1986 at Marist College Ashgrove. We were boarders. There were a couple of guys on this call, Perry, Fabian, who were in this story with us at boarding school. Well, what were the things that you took away from that part of your journey, and what are the things that stand out in your memory about your time?
You know, I've said this to Tia, my wife, that the reason why all us blokes from Ashgrove are close is because we were 12 when we went to boarding school. We weren't even teenagers. You know what I mean? We were 12. So we had to bond together and bind together. Like, that's what I got from it. Like, I'm still close from, like, when Perry came here at 17, it's so easy, just like that. When I went to see Joe Coote, just like that, you know?
Yeah. So
that's what we take away from it. Like, I joke with Tia about this, the parents say, oh, I was for a better education. I was like, that's a bunch of bullshit. They just wanted the kids out of the house so they could have their lives back. I mean, you guys have all got kids. I don't. So, you know what I mean? Like, mum and dad, oh, yeah, it's for your education. Like, yeah, sure.
Well, we and it was a great time. It was a time.
It was unbelievable, man. It was the best.
Yeah, and we
Like I said to Sarge too, I said, mate, 1987 was one of the most successful years in Ashgrove history. And he said, that's pretty surprising considering the close proximity to a bunch of madmen in white dresses that were teaching us. And it's true. I mean, all the good brothers left, right? The lunatics stayed there.
But we all managed to survive. And,
Exactly.
and most of us have managed to thrive as well, which is great. And you can see already that we're going to be in for a pretty entertaining session with Shaun. So post.
Can I ask you guys one thing? You know how we used to dip our cups into the cordial thing at boarding school? I don't think that'll be happening now with COVID. Do you think?
I don't think that would be happening, Shaun. I think
my goodness.
I think, but once again, all survive. So, tell us what happened. So that took us to the end of school, and school was great. And there were so many characters and successful characters coming out of that, and continue to be coming out of that. Post school,
my first year out of school, I went to play Brothers Rugby League because my dad played for Queensland Rugby League. He actually played with Perry's dad, Ray. That's right.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you went out and played rugby league. You went out and so what?
And I got beaten up terribly because it's such a harsh game. And then 89, I went back to Brothers Rugby Union because it wasn't so harsh. I dislocated my shoulder in 87 by Andrew G. He was playing for East. And I went to tackle his tree trunk legs and he just popped my shoulder straight out. So then I went back to Brothers Rugby Union in 89 and I was playing with Pat McGrath and Simon Best and John Eales. Brendan Williamson was there. Wow. And then we won the Colts 1 grand final in 89. And then I started playing grade football at Brothers. I played some first grade in 92. And then 93, I won the 3rd grade grand final. And then 94, I came over to the States with Brothers Rugby on a trip with Angus. I mean, so we were only 23 at the time. We were pretty young. And then we went to play in New York. And we lived in Manhattan and we worked at this Irish bar. So that was fun. And then I went to London with Angus and then he stayed. And then I came back to San Francisco in January 95. Okay,
so tell us about that, because San Francisco, obviously, it's your home now,
well, it is. I mean, this year, mate. This year is year 26 for me in San Francisco. So I've actually lived longer in the States than Australia. Look, I'm still Australian, but I've just lived here longer. You know.
Yeah. So tell us about the business that you built in San Francisco, because
this is what I did. I sent you the last 2 jobs, right? That I did. Perry, you saw that.
Yeah.
And so what happened in 19, after the accident, I spent all year in hospital learning to do everything again, reading.
Yeah, so let's leave that part because I do want to get to that. Tell us about 95. So you land in San Fran in 95.
So I was living in London and my mum was coming over for her 50th birthday. And I called my brother up because it was cold and expensive in London. And then I had a great time. And then I said, is there any work? And he said, yes. So I had a ticket back here and I came back for Mum's 50th and then that was it.
And so, well, tell us about when you said that was it. So you landed in San Francisco.
My brother was a contractor and he kind of taught me all the stuff about carpentry. And he moved back to Australia in 2003. He moved here just after the earthquake in 89. So I came over to play a rugby season at the end of 90. And I thought, this place is unreal. I'm coming back. And then I went back to play Brothers Rugby. And then they said, well, we're going on a trip to the States. And so Angus and I were like, cool, let's go. And then I arranged to play rugby in New York. And so Angus and I moved there anyway, and then London. And then it was just like, well, I had work. So I came back and then that was it. And then my brother moved back to Australia in 2003. Then I got my contractor's license in 2004. And I started off by doing kitchens and bathrooms until I started doing big $2 million jobs, you know.
Yeah, and so you built a really successful business in San
I
Francisco.
did. And then, so see, my ex-business partner, he's from Bristol in England, or Pucklechurch outside of Bristol. And the plan was I was coming back to Australia to have a year off and be fit and healthy, which is what I was doing, and then come back, and then he would go to England. Now, it just didn't turn out that way.
Yeah, so in that journey of business and building the business, what did you learn about, what did you take away from that time in building the business in San Francisco? What?
Never be late for a meeting. Always leave your phone in the truck. You know what I mean? Like, I can't stand that shit. Just like, leave your phone alone.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, never be late for a meeting, and don't be distracted.
You know what I learned in Queensland is manners are free, right? So that's all that is.
And do you think those good manners helped you be successful in
Absolutely.
San Francisco?
You know, like, I've had people over here, clients, say to me, look, sometimes you probably won't like what Shaun's going to tell you with pricing, but he's straight up and he's going to tell you the truth. And that's all that counts, you know?
Yeah, fantastic. So honesty, be on time, and don't be distracted. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to a meeting, be in the meeting, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't be somewhere else or on your phone. And it just drives me insane.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So let's just take us to the space where you built a massively successful business with a partner. And
okay, so this is what happened. So I had the aneurysm, and like I said, there was no symptoms, no nothing. Now, I was telling Mick before, you read the story that I sent you on the Courier Mail, right, Perry?
Yes, mate. Yes, I did.
But what happened on the beach was completely different. So the people who dragged me from the water, I actually thought they were in the water when I was swimming. Tia just told me that.
Actually, let's step back from that for a second, Shaun, because not everyone's read the story. So let's make sure that people understand where this story evolved from. So, Shaun, you coming down, you've decided to take a year off.
Yes.
You've decided to take a year off, and you're taking this year off, and you get down in January. You go up
January 26th, Australia Day, and then we drove up to Noosa, and then we listened to the Hot 100, and I was telling, you know, Tia was surprised about all the bands that were Australian. Fantastic. And then from the very next day, I was in the water, and you know, Main Beach there, you know, right in the corner down to the first rock wall is 400 meters and back is 800. So I just started doing that, being fit and healthy. I was picking up my nephew and niece and taking him to school, and everything was golden, you know? Yeah,
and so for people who don't really know Australia, the Sunshine Coast, around that space, you were in Noosa, Shaun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right on Main Beach there.
Yeah, probably one of the most beautiful parts of the world. Yeah, so absolutely.
Well, they say if you're going to have a medical episode, have one at Noosa's Main Beach, because there's all specialists on holidays there. And that's what happened to me. Well, that's what happened. Perry, the girl who pulled me out was an anesthesiologist of all things.
So, and Shaun's an interesting piece, because you made some really strong decisions about the health you wanted to have while you were down there, hadn't you? You'd given up things. You said, right, I'm going to really have a run at being.
I'd gone to hypnotherapy. I'd stopped smoking, because I used to smoke cigarettes and drink wine and all kinds of stuff, you know. So I got down there. We were drinking light beer at the Sunshine Beach Surf Club, watching the Australian Open tennis. And so everything was golden.
And you decided to get fit, and you were swimming about 800 meters a day, weren't you? You were doing that
every day.
Swimming.
I started by 400, then I, you know, doing my typical thing, I pushed myself. So then I was going 800, and then I was coming back to do 1200, you know, and then that's when it happened. Halfway down the beach. So
let's talk about, because I know you're dying to get into this part, because I've had to stop you about 5 times already from jumping into it. But so what date was it, Shaun? So you're walking down to the beach, feeling.
So January 26th, we get there to Australia, right? Australia Day. I was in the water for 2 months, and it didn't happen till March the 20th. So every day I was in the ocean.
So March 20. you're walking down to Main Beach, feeling fine, I'm assuming.
You know, the only thing Tia said, I had no symptoms again. The only thing I said was like, oh, I don't really want to do this today. And then I was like, fuck it, I'll just do it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's,
So
when I was swimming, I felt like I got hit over the back of the head with a hammer. And they say you can have a really extreme headache. And I assume that was it.
okay, so you jump in the water. Then now I'm going to give you a chance just to tell this part of the story. So tell us about that day and what your memories about that day are.
I remember what the water looked like because we went back up to thank the lifesavers, and I said to Tia, the water was like that, and she said, yes, it was. So it was really calm. It was so mild and mellow, you know. It's just like I didn't really want to go and work out, but I was like, just go and do it, you know. And then that's what happened.
Yeah. So
and then from that point,
no, well, tell us about the day. So you jump in the water, you're swimming.
I'm swimming down. I feel like I've been hit over the head with the back of a hammer. Then that's all I remember. Nothing else. Nothing being pulled from the water or any of that shit, you know.
So tell us how you were rescued.
Well, the two, I thought they were two tourists, but they were two tourists, but they were on the beach. I thought they were in the water with me, and they saw me, and they thought I was snorkeling, but they were actually up on the beach, and they saw me, and they thought I was snorkeling. And then they were, well, fuck, he's not moving. So then they came and pulled me from the water, and it just so happens that one of them was an anesthesiologist. So she performed CPR on me for 2 minutes. And from that point, which Sarge says to me, mate, this is ridiculous. I've gotten up, I've walked to the lifesavers, I've told them my name, my wife's name, even her telephone number in her Australian phone number. And so this one day, I didn't come back from my swim because every day Tia was used to seeing me come back. And then, I mean, this is what Tia asked me if I have PTSD. I don't, but I think a lot of the other people around me do. So I didn't come back from my swim, and she calls up a sister in the Bay Area here and says, what do I do? And she said, go see the lifesavers. So she walked up to the lifesavers and she said, I'm looking for my husband. He hasn't come back from his swim yet. And they said, what's his name? And she said, Shaun Gelling. And they just said, come with me. He's had an accident. And that was it.
And so you got up after the CPR, but obviously, and when we look at this, obviously, there were some massive challenges. So talk to us about actually.
Well, let me just finish this story.
Like
everything that happened to me that day was just, I got so lucky. You know what I mean? Like, they took me up to the Surf Lifesaving Club. I was unconscious or whatever I was, you know. When we went back to see the lifesavers, he had said to me, he's like, mate, when I rolled you over, you were gurgling water. So I'd swallowed that much water. And then they took me to the Sunshine Coast Hospital, right? And they said on the way there, I became increasingly hypoxic, which is lack of oxygen. I made it there. And then Tia just told me the other day that they told her to say last goodbyes. They give me 24 hours to live because there's a thing called a dry drowning, which is basically drowning on dry land because I'd swallowed so much salt water. And so when I was in there, Tia had called Sarge up, who worked at the RBH, right?
So just for clarity, guys, Sarge is Simon Whiteheart.
Yeah,
and
right.
Sarge is one of Shaun's best mates.
Well, he is my best mate, and I'm his best mate, you know.
Yeah, fantastic. So
that's why he has PTSD from hearing the chopper come in, not me. See, so what happened? His mate David Putt worked at the Sunshine Coast Hospital, and so Sarge called up Putty, and Putty only knew me as Kevy Gelling, my nickname, and I came in as Shaun Gelling, and then Sarge said, "No, that's Kevy," and Putty's like, "Oh no," he's like, "Mate, you don't want to see a scan of his brain. He's had a catastrophic brain bleed," and so at that point they couldn't perform neurosurgery at the Sunshine Coast, so they airlifted me to the Royal Brisbane Hospital. And this is what I say, Sarge is working there and he's got PTSD for the choppers coming in all the time, thinking it was me. And that's when they put me in an induced.
And so, and I'll just share that picture because it's there. And a few others
Well,
around it.
see the scar I've got there, right? That's a craniotomy. Now, when I was in there, the neurosurgeon said to Tia, because Tia was saying he's a really sporty kind of guy. He's athletic, you know, and all that. And then he said, we can go through a catheter and coil it, right? It happened on the right frontal lobe.
So there's some of the staples, Shaun.
That's 66 staples there. And when they took him out, I asked them, do you have any topical anesthetic? And they said, no, we got to take him out every second one. And so I could feel these staples being pulled out of my skull. Anyway, so this is why I feel bad for Tia, like what she had to go through. When I was in surgery, the neurosurgeon said, because he's a sporty kind of guy, if you coil it, the coils will break down over time, right? He said, we can do a craniotomy and clip it. And she said, well, what are the downsides of that surgery? And he's straight up. He said, well, I could kill him or I could make him a vegetable. So I said to Tia, you made the right call.
Yeah, and I've just had a question from Olivia. And Olivia, nothing hit Shaun in the head. That he had just had a massive aneurysm. So the stitches that you see there were as a result of the neurosurgery that
they cut open my skull, and then they take the bone plate and put it in a special fridge for like 6 weeks or whatever it is, and so because it doesn't rot. And then 6 weeks later, that's a craniotomy when they take it out, and then a craniectomy is when they put it back in, and that's when the staples are.
Yeah, so so this is the part that actually now is, and once again, I want to thanks Shaun for sharing these pictures, because here is, because they're, and once again, apologies to all the faint-hearted here who might be with us, because that whole idea of what it looks like, and I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this piece because it's a phenomenal.
Hey, Olivia, can I say something? Like, an aneurysm is basically a form of a stroke, but it's not really a stroke. It's basically a burst blood vessel, and it's a birth defect. Like when I was in there, the neurosurgeon said it's genetic, you know, and that's why my father had one in 2019. And then his sister, my auntie, had one. So basically I had it. It was just a ticking time bomb, you know. And what bursts an aneurysm is high blood pressure. And this is just my theory, that being in the ocean every day for 2 months, every day just kept pounding on that weakened blood vessel until one day it just went.
And that piece around it, there are so many components to that, and just fascinated by the impact that had. So Shaun, tell us about now, and I'm interested in this, mate. Tell us about the recovery, because this is the part where resilience really comes into it, because obviously you were in a space where,
and I can tell you 2018 I enjoyed more because I was learning to do everything again. 2019 sucked because I went back to Australia.
Okay, so but don't jump that part out though, because I think it's as much as I'm interested in the part that sucked, I'm also massively interested in the pieces of.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say there, Toddy, it's been many trials and tribulations to this whole brain injury that it's taken me ups and downs, you know, and I keep fighting because I have to. Yeah. That's why I was saying, see, 2019, see what happened, I went back down there and I was doing boxing training, metabolic physical training, not being hit around the head, obviously. And I passed out in the elevator one day, and then I went back to the RBH and they took a, you know, an EEG, and they said, well, you got metal in you brain. I said, well, I got 3 clips in my brain, that's why. And then they put me on this drug called Keppra, which is an anti-seizure, because they were saying, well, is it a seizure? And I had to take this drug if I wanted to drive again, right? And it's a nasty drug. It's just nasty.
Yeah, so those are the pieces that I'm really interested in, because obviously we've also got
Well, that was my point, Toddy. Like 18, I was excited because I had to learn everything again. 19, I put on this shitty drug, which sent me pear-shaped. Like what I was saying to you earlier, most people don't understand. This is not a broken leg or a broken arm where you can mend in 2 months, right? That is my first day walking. And it's literally taken 2 years for my brain to come back to normal. It's 3.5 years now, right? It happened March 20 and 18.
and so this piece here. So this is the first day that you get up.
That's my very first day walking again, man.
And I know your tempo, because you've always been high tempo. Even when I was peeling off the back of scrums, you're saying, Toddy, give me the ball earlier. For God's sake, give me the ball earlier. So
you know, the person who cops the hardest time for me, Toddy, is me.
Of course, yeah, as it always has been.
Well, I got to say it to you. If I wasn't so hard on myself, I wouldn't be doing the shit I'm doing right now. It's only because I'm really hard on myself.
So tell us about that first year of 2018, learning to read, walk, talk, do all of those things again.
Well, like I said, it was just such a devastating thing. Like I had a feeding tube in and all kinds of stuff. I used to have to wear a helmet because of my staples, and then I had these mitts because I kept pulling the feeding tube out. And Tia was like, Shaun, please don't take it out, because then they've got to put it back in. And a mate of mine, Kieran O'Donnell, he was down there at the time, and he came to see me. He's like, dude, it was brutal because they were trying to feed the thing back down my throat. And he said it was just horrible to see.
Yeah, and so as part of that, and on that journey as part of that, you talk about the principles of resilience, about your ability, regardless of what happened, to get knocked down, to get back up again. So that's like, it's easy to talk about. It's easy for us to talk about that when we.
Yeah, but mate, I was telling you earlier, mate, I've been failed twice on my driving assessment in Brisbane, right? So I've been knocked down, but I keep getting back up. That's the key. Keep getting back up. You know, like, what do you got to lose? At the end of the day, what do you got to lose?
Well, yeah, you know what, Shaun, there's a lot. It's easy to say that for a lot of us. We're in a space where, it's resilience is such an important thing, but the things that you've got back up from, and here's another picture of you, and take us through this one, because this is a different picture. What's happening here?
Well, that's when I was a B-row and I hadn't slept that much. So I think I'm looking happy to be alive.
Yeah, leaving, getting out.
So what happened was I was in induced coma, and then I was in ICU for 15 days at the RBH, and then I was stable enough that they transferred me to the brain injury rehab unit at the PA on the south side of Brisbane. And that's a locked ward, because if you get out, you can't find your way back in.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you've got a brain injury. So, at that point, like, you've got amnesia, and, I had a severe case of deja vu. Like, everywhere I went, I felt like I'd been there. You know what I mean?
Okay. And
so, look, like I said to you, mate, what I went through, I was saying to Sarge, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy, what I had to go through. But the fact that I'm here now, and like I said to you, I'm only giving myself a break, mate, 3.5 years later from the shit that I went through. And I was like, now I sit back and I'm like, wow, I pulled through that,
Yeah. So talk to us about that, mate. What are some of the principles? What are some of the principles?
Earlier, mate, when I was in the RBH, I didn't have a choice, right? I didn't have a choice because I didn't know what was going on. I said, when I went back to Australia, before I came back, October 26, 19 to San Francisco, it was then I had two choices, right? Because I said to myself, I had this joke with myself. I stood in the hall of mirrors and I had a good, hard, long talk to myself. Well, you've got two choices. A, you can give in, or B, which is the choice I took. You know, in Australia, we have that open up a can of Toughen Up. Well, I opened up 2 cans of Toughen Up and 2 cans of Harden Up to get to where I am now.
Yeah, okay, right.
I mean, I had to do it. Like, that was my choice. I said, look, and I resigned from my business in 19, and then I was like, look, you're going to get back there. You've done it before. You can do it again. And that's the mindset I had, man. It's just, the mind's a very powerful thing if you set it to do something, you know. That's what I've learned right now.
Yeah, so tell us some of the principles that you've learned out of that. So that the harden up, toughen up, and every time I get knocked down, I get back up again. What else?
It's having a go. Like, you won't know until you have a go, right? You've got to have a go. Like, you got to be in it to win it. Like, the way I look at things, like, it's like a game of rugby or a game of cricket. It's a game of life. You know, you got to be in it to win it, right?
Fantastic.
Just some of us has to do it different ways than other people. And I'm just one of those. Look, I've been dealt a pretty shitty blow, but at the end of the day, I'm alive. What do? I need to harden up and do it. And that's what I've done. You know, when I sent you photos of playing Pebble Beach, right? Now, there's an example. When I came back from Australia, randomly a mate of mine said, do you want to play golf? And I said, sure. And I got out there and I said, wow, this is really cool. And I started writing a journal, and I played 10 games. And then I was like, I'm going to go play Spyglass down at Pebble Beach. So I went down and I played Spyglass with this guy, Eli. And he told me that he played Pebble Beach. And I was, well, if he can play it, I can play it, because he wasn't as good as me. Well, and that's what I did. So that was on January 6th. And I came out, and Darren Emersall texted me from London. He's like, oh, I see Trump's been at it again. I'm about what? And I Googled, I was like, why are people so surprised? You know what I mean?
But so tell us about what it took to get back to golf, though, mate. And
well, this is my point, man. I came back, I played 10 games. It was progression. And I told Tia, when I started playing, I was playing shit. But what I did, I kept going and going and going. And I said, eventually it's going to come to me. And it did. And I went and played Spyglass. And after that, I said, I'm going to play Pebble Beach. And I went down and played it January 26th. And you know that hole I sent you a photo where the green below?
Yes.
Well, the first time I played it, I was in such awe that I didn't really, I was just taking it all in, you know. When I went and played it April 14th for my 51st birthday, I actually cried on top of that hole because I couldn't believe I'd done it, you know.
And then you were out here.
That's
Wow.
at Olympic Club in San Francisco. I mean, that was special. I mean, I said to Sarge, I was high on life for 3 days after playing that. It was amazing.
Yeah, fantastic, man. And the thought that from that man pulled drowning in the ocean to with massive aneurysm, having to learn to walk, talk.
You know what the worst thing
again.
was, Toddy? I used to have this thing called brain fog, right? And when people ask me about it, the only way I can try and explain it, there's a scene in Woody Allen's movie Deconstructing Harry, and it's called Out of Focus, and it's Robin Williams. And that's how I felt for 2.5 years. Every day I woke up, I was out of focus. That's why I said it was a broken brain. And a broken brain takes a lot longer to heal than a broken leg.
Yeah.
So I had that for 2.5 years. I was playing golf last year with these mates of mine, and I've never laughed so hard in my life. And it scared my brain straight. And I haven't been out of focus since that day last year. So
yeah,
he said, maybe we've got to keep playing golf.
Yeah, well, maybe, mate. Okay, so now you've got back to, and there's so many great parts of this story. Now you're back in San Francisco.
So what I did when I came back, I did the paperwork and I got my new license, because it was originally my license, and then I'm now doing my own thing. So
what does doing your own thing look like?
Well, I've learnt a new way to do business. Before I went to Australia, I had like 15 employees. Now I have none, and I just sub stuff out whenever I need guys. Like, I have a whole pool of labour that I can get if I need them. And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and
Oh,
fantastic.
look, I'm not going to do those big jobs like a century because those jobs are just way too big, and I don't need that stress anymore, you know?
Yeah, fantastic. And you and Tia are such a great partnership. Tell us
I
what
mean,
it's.
she was my caregiver all year in 18. Like when I went into that's why I was saying it's not PTSD for me, it's PTSD for Tia and Sarge. You know, because Tia happened to make those decisions for me, like being in Australia, not really knowing anybody. She knew my friends, but like not really knowing anybody. And she's like, holy shit. And so she stayed in these apartments right across from the RBH called the Annex. And she would come and see me every day. And they told her then to divide your day up into 3 days, morning, lunch, and dinner. And if he survives each of those things, then you move to the next one.
Wow.
And that was for the first month.
You're it's some sort of story, Shaun. Especially in terms of the resilience piece that you've shown. So if I asked you, and which I'm about to, what are the top 3 lessons you take away from your journey?
Don't give in. Don't give
give-
in. Like, I've been knocked down so many times. So, like I told you, when I left Beirut, I've always been go big or go home, you know, and that probably helped me survive because I'm a stubborn motherfucker,
Mm,
you know.
yeah, and so the piece around don't give in is 1. 2.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I told you, it's not a fear of failure. It's like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, you know. And I said that to Tia and Beirut. I said, look, let me make mistakes because that's the only way I learn. So when anybody tells me that they don't make mistakes, I call that a bunch of bullshit because everybody makes mistakes. It's a matter of this point trying to mitigate your mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I would always say to my guys on construction sites, like, look, tell me now at the foundation before we're 3 stories up, because it's a lot harder for me to fix that shit when I'm up there than down there.
Yeah.
But everybody made, and I said that to Tia, it's like, look, let me make mistakes because that's the only way I'm going to learn.
Yeah, fantastic. So, like, so many of the principles that we believe in, you know, never give up.
Well, here's the one for that.
Learn from
It's
your
that
mistakes.
Japanese proverb. The Japanese proverb I told you, you get knocked down 4 times, you get back up 5. That's what I'm doing.
Fantastic. Okay. Right. What I'm going to do now, because I think it's such a fascinating story, is I'm going to give people an opportunity to ask questions, because you've taken us to a space where I think it's just really worthwhile just to ask some questions about your story, because it's an inspiring story told in a way that is real and visceral.
Mate, you know, the funny thing is, Toddy, like, it is pretty amazing for other people. But I said to Tia, I used to tell that story to people when I play golf, and I don't tell it anymore because I'm so bored with the shit, because I had to live it, right?
Well, I hope that you'll stay energized enough for some people to ask some stories.
Oh, no, I am. Like, mate, trust me, when I got back in 19, I went back up to the PA and I did paperwork, because when I get back to Australia, I'm going to volunteer up at Beirut where I was in there, you know, because it's devastating.
How good that you're going to be in that space to volunteer. So we've got so many different people on this call from all over the world today, and we've got, I've just seen the big man Juddy has jumped on the call as well. Guys, if you've got any questions, you can just type them into Olivia, and then we can get a chance to ask them. But Brozzy, I'm going to start with you, because obviously you know Kevy pretty well. You stopped in to see him in San Francisco, where in the time before this.
Look, and I guess to give you a bit of background on what sort of person Shaun is, I was taking my family for a holiday, and while we went to school together and we were friends, we weren't in the same friend group. So we were more acquaintances and caught up at different times. But, you know, we weren't necessarily close mates, but we were friendly. So and then he came back for a reunion cricket day and we got talking over a few beers. He said, look, if you're ever in the States, give me a call. It'd be great to catch up. And people say that in a flippant way. And I thought, well, I'm going to take him up on that because I was going to the States and I was going to be in San Francisco. And I thought, if I can just catch up for a beer, that'd be fantastic. So I rang Shaun and said, mate, I'm coming over on these dates. I've checked into this hotel, whatever. And we had about a 10-minute conversation. And he said, oh, that's not far from me. That's great. You know, yeah, let's do something. Let's catch up for dinner. So anyway, hung up the phone. Within 2 minutes, the phone's rung back. He said, cancel your booking. You're staying with me. I said, mate, I don't expect to be staying with you. I've got my wife and my 2 kids and we're fine. He said, no, I just spoke to Tia. You're staying with us. And he said, I'm coming to pick you up from the airport. We've got a place for you. And he, mate, turned it on, and he didn't have to do that. But that just showed the quality of the guy that he is. And we had a great time. We went to his local restaurant.
No problem.
He dropped us back to the airport. We had a great time. He taught my daughter how to play guitar left-handed because he's a left-handed guitarist, self-taught. And Zara was just starting playing guitar, and she was all confused. She picked up this guitar; it was facing the wrong way, and so they have fond memories of that time with Shaun in San Francisco. So he's a man of his word. If he says something, he's going to do it. And it's not.
Did I take you on a drive around the city, Perry?
Yes, you did, mate. You looked after us. You took us up to
okay, well, that's the thing. Yeah, well, there's a thing called Kevy's Tours in San Francisco. Anytime anybody comes in town, I take them for a drive around. I've got my whole route worked out.
Yep, you took us right up to that lookout point where you could see the whole city.
Yeah. Well, Pat McGrath was over here with his wife and 2 kids in 2013 too, and I took them on a trip too. And at the end of it, they all gave him a round of applause. Like, all right, Kevy's Tours, great.
No, I highly recommend Kevy's Tours. So
don't do the hop on, hop off bus. Just get in with me, mate.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think that's interesting.
I'd love to repay the favour, and when you come down, because he said I'm planning on coming down next year. I said, well, make sure when you're doing your tour around Australia, because that's what he was doing. He was taking here to show him his country where he came from. And
I was planning train trips and everything on the GAN and everything.
Yeah.
You know?
I said, you're staying with us when you're on the Gold Coast. He said, yep, no worries, we'll stay with you. But that obviously never eventuated because he got as far as Noosa and then his world got turned upside down. So, mate, but that offer still stands. You know,
it hasn't eventuated yet, Perry, but it will, mate.
Yeah, but and I think that authenticity has come through today. You know, like Kev is who he is and turns up as in an authentic way, which is interesting. Kev, you said, mate, that your dad, and Olivia just asked the question, your dad suffered, was lucky enough to have that aneurysm discovered when he was in having.
Well, he went to have a couple of hernias done in Toowoomba, and then he found an aneurysm, aortic aneurysm, which measured 92 millimeters, which is 9.2 centimeters, which is nearly 4 inches. Mine only measured 2 millimeters, and it did all that damage. And so the doctor said, if that had burst, you were gone. And then I found out that his sister, my auntie, had an aortic aneurysm as well. So it runs in the family.
But did both of they're both okay? They're both.
Well, Dad's fine. He had some procedure. His sister nearly bled out. She's still alive, but they kind of saved her, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So it's basically a birth defect, you know.
And May, remarkable that you've recovered. I think it talks about your resilience pretty heavily as well.
Like I said, mate, at that point I didn't have any choice, did I? Like I had to do it. Like I said, all of a sudden I'm like a perfectly healthy individual, and I'm in a wheelchair. I'm like, what is going on here? What is going on? Yeah, and that's why Tia was my biggest supporter when I was in hospital. She was like, look, he's a surfer, he's a golfer, he swims. They're trying to portray me as a really sporty kind of guy. And that's when he said about the craniotomy, it gives him a better chance of recovery rather than coiling. He said it's more risky, but, and so that's what happened.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I kind of like, Tia and I, we can only look back on it now and laugh, but at the time it was really dire, you know, like, I mean, I sent you that photo, Toddy, of the boys who came to see me in the coma, and they all look very scared, mate, and rightly so.
Yeah, but that's another key component for me about your recovery is the quality of the mates you had around you.
Right. Well, they really looked after Tia too, you know, like, and like Sarge and Greg McGann, you know, those guys would take me back to Beirut and all kinds of stuff, you know.
Yeah, and I think that piece is the quality of your friends, and that also speaks volumes of the quality of the way that you've the authenticity that example in a story from Perry is a great example. Right. Does anyone else have?
You know what I'm like these days, Toddy? It's just like it's like I'm a very humble person. It's never really been about me. That's why I'm more concerned about Tia and Sarge. Like I was telling you, but Perry, you probably don't know this, but Sarge, Eels, and I were in primary school together, grade 1 and 2 at St Williams in Grovely, and that's why we're so tight. Because then I went to the Queensland country because mum and dad had pubs, and then I came back to boarding school in grade 8 in 1983, and there's Johnny Eels and Simon Whiteheart. So, like, well, I already knew somebody.
Yeah, which is great. Right. Does anyone else have any other questions? You feel free to pop on to the audio if you have another question for Shaun, because it is a remarkable story.
Can I just add one quick thing there, Toddy? Talking
You can
about
add as
Sarge.
many things as you like, mate.
Sorry, mate?
You can add as many things as you like.
Well,
mate.
I just want to say that, like, you know, Sarge having PTSD because he worked at the RBH when I came in. And I was talking to him a few months ago, and I said, look, man, I just want to know what happened because it was such a severe injury. And he's like, look, when are you going to get over this? And Tia said, wow, tough crowd. And it's like, no, it's not a tough crowd. He's just my best mate. And the more I've thought about it, it's like, he wants me to get over it so he can get over it. You know what I mean? Like, he's the one with PTSD, hearing the choppers flying all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's more about other people and me. You know what I mean? Like, at the time, they did all that work and helped me out. Now it's my turn to repay the favor, you know?
Yeah, fantastic. And that repaying the favor. So
well, he's repaying the
difficult.
favor. Like, Perry, when you stayed with me, mate, like, everybody who's come through from Australia has always stayed with me. Greg McGann, Simon Clark, Angus McDonald, Cameron McDonald, everybody. And so when I was at the RBH, there was so many people coming to see me. I said to Tia at one point, I said, I can't see any more people. I'm fucking worn out. And so, you know what I mean? And my mum said to me, she's like, there were people lining up outside the waiting room for you, Shaun, which is really nice, you know. But again, I was saying to Tia, I'd looked after every one of those people coming through San Francisco, you know?
Yeah.
So they were just repaying the favor for me.
Yeah, which is such a powerful piece. So there's I've taken away a number of things about this conversation today. So one is authenticity. You know, show up as yourself, which you certainly do. Two, when you get knocked down, just keep getting back up again. Yeah, I think that those pieces really important.
Toddy, there's one thing someone noted, just said, look, I wrote down, you only get out of life what you put into it, right? And what I'm achieving right now is only because I put in a lot of hard work to get to where I am right now. Because I shouldn't be playing Pebble Beach, but I am. Because I told myself, I'm like, dude, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And so, like I said, I've been knocked back twice in Brisbane for my driver's license. And when I got back to San Francisco, I told my GP, and he's like, well, have you notified DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles? I said, well, no. And he said, well, that's right, it happened in Australia. And he said, legally, I have to notify DMV. So they took my license away, right? And did when I came back to Sanford, I started walking the streets. I was Forrest Gumping it everywhere, just getting to know the speed of the cars and all that kind of stuff, you know. And then I did my assessments and I got my license back. My point being is I've been knocked back twice, but I kept getting back up and trying to the point now where I've got my license back and it's cool, you know. Like I bought a truck and again, I'm completely different than what I was 6 months ago. I can tell you that right now.
And I feel like you're going to be completely different in 6 more months, mate.
I will. Well, there's a thing called a neuroplasticity of the brain. And, you know, what I was trying to say to Tia is when that accident happened to me, the only analogy I can use, I had to learn another language at 48. Like, granted, I knew English, but I still had to learn it again. I had to learn to swallow again. You know, like I had drowning dreams for 2 years after that shit. You know, like I would wake up and make myself vomit because I felt like I was drowning. I mean, I pretty much did. So that's why.
Yeah. So, and Olivia's asked this question again. Have you been back swimming in the ocean?
Absolutely. I went back up. I got out of Beirut July 26th, right? And there's so many funny things happening there. For as dire as it was, like I used to always say to my mum, like, Mum, when am I being released? And she's like, Shaun, you're not in prison. And I felt like it, you know, because I'm in a locked ward. You know, so when am I being released? And anyway, when I got out, randomly again, like, do you remember David Hinchcliffe, who was the Deputy Lord Mayor of Brisbane under Jim Sawley?
Yeah. Okay,
so how's this? His ex-wife's walking through the park because Tia's staying at the annex apartments right across from the RBH. David lives in the valley and he's a very successful artist. And his ex-wife Meg was walking in the park with the dog with my godmother, and my godmother told Meg the story. And Meg's like, "Oh, David's got a place out the back. He's got this back cottage." And then he said, "Oh, Tia, come and stay with me." So Tia stayed with him, and then I started going to stay with him on weekends I was allowed out. And then as one of those weekends, Olivia, I went back up to Main Beach to thank the lifesavers and then try and find out who pulled me from the water, but they didn't know. And so I was back in the water then. And then I went back to Tangalooma that year in Moreton Island. I was swimming, and I've never had a fear of the water, you know.
Fantastic. Right, guys, I'm interested in, does anyone else have any other questions for Shaun out of this amazing story? Happy for you to jump on live if you do. Olivia, thanks for the questions. Perry, thanks for the questions. For me, I love those components, and the piece you spoke about as well is contribution, and I love that idea of contribution. Is that your idea was to go back and to volunteer?
Well, here's the devastating thing, Toddy. When I went back, I came back in January of 19 to check on my business, and it pretty much been running to the ground. So I was like, we went back to Australia, and then I went back up to Beirut to do the paperwork to volunteer, and I still saw one guy that was in there with me. That's 6 months later. So that's pretty brutal. And I remember, like, I used to have to go down and do this, like, occupational therapy and all that stuff. And this one girl down there had half a head like me, and she was devastated. It's like your self-esteem. She's like, I just want my bone plate back, you know, and she couldn't get it. So I have enormous amounts of empathy for people like that these days, you know, because I know what it's like to go through that shit.
But also to come out the other side, you're an inspiration to people and coming out the other side as well. So,
well, I mean, that's just don't give up, keep trying, right? Yeah. Like, the more you put into life, the more you're going to get out of it. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm back boxing training here. Again, not being hit around the head, metabolic physical. And I started 2 rounds, and then I to the top of the basketball key, and then to Tia. It's like, let's go to the halfway line, and then full court all the way back. And you do 2 punches, back up, all the way up to 20, all the way back down. So I just started pushing myself, you know. And this morning I did 6 rounds. And I find the first 2 rounds are easy for me now because I put in the hard work previous to that.
Yeah. And
So my point being, you will get out of life what you put into it.
there's the label for today's session. So listen, with that, Shaun, I'm going to stop the recording now. I'll offer people the opportunity to get into it. You do get out of life what you put into it. Think about making a contribution.
Well, I wrote down here that note. You put into life what you get out of it. I'm proof positive of that, right? Because I should be dead as a doormat, like my brother said, but I'm not. And
well,
now
you're
that
clearly
I'm here,
not. You're clearly not, mate. You're large and in the room. You're large and in the room. And that.
Well, Kieran O'Donoghue said to me, he's like, mate, this is the way I look at things now, Toddy. Like, for the longest time, it was shit, right? And now, Kieran said to me, he's like, dude, most of us only get 1 shot at life. You've been given 2. And now that I've embraced that, like, that changes my complete outlook on things. Like, I get to do what the rest of you don't. You only get to live once. I get to live twice, you know?
It's a great mindset, mate. It's a great mindset.
Well, and look, I'm not the only one. Like, Sharon Stone had an aneurysm, right, in 2001. And I read her book, like The Joy of Living Twice. It's like, well, that's true. And so what I keep doing now, she mentions in the book, because I have my right frontal lobe, my left side is numb, right? And it has been since that accident. And I asked the neurosurgeon, will this go away? And this is why I liked him. He said, I can't tell you that. He said, I don't know, and I can't tell you, you know? And so in her book, she says about her feeling comes back on one of her sides. And I'm like, well, Shauna, if you just look after yourself and keep doing this stuff, it'll come back. It'll come back. And that's what I keep telling myself.
Yeah, and the optimism and the energy that you've brought into this room today, I'm inspired to go and keep on getting up and keep on making a contribution. At the end of the day,
Toddy, what do you got to lose, right? I wrote notes down, even when I was in Ashgrove and playing sport and rugby and cricket and all that kind of stuff. It's like, at the end of the day, what do you got to lose? If you try your best, as long as you can hold your head up high at the end of the day and say, I gave it 100%, right? That's all you can do.
I think today what people have seen, Shaun, is that you've given it 120, and that energy is something that absolutely loves. So,
look, mate, I'm not pissing in my own pocket here, Toddy, but like, seriously, if you're going to play sport with me or whatever it is, the person next to me is going to know that I'm next to them and they're in good hands. You know, like, I don't want anybody beside me playing rugby or cricket who's not going to give 100%, because I'm going to give 120. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, mate. And I think you've shown that today.